It is Sunday, February 6th, and boy, this semester's going by fast. We're working on week 5 now, which is cancer and death and dying grief. And I always ask John if I can sit in on this one because those are two subjects I'm very passionate about. So let's go.
We'll go straight to it. I'm going to send out a video next week on a how-to for CT1 as well, guys. Let's get into it here.
Okay, so if you go into the week 5, you'll see that we are basing a lot of what this week is about on the GERO report, which is the National Cancer Institute report to the nation on cancer statistics.
And let's pause right here. What we normally do, guys, at this point in time, some of you guys you see all this really cool information that Julie put this together, by the way. She's passionate about cancer, but we would come down here and we would say, where is it? Where is it? There it is. Okay, so you're going to go ahead and open your quiz. Always do that first. I think it's just easiest. Get a feel for what's going on, or review the information. But whenever you are ready to do the quiz, you just have 2 tabs. Okay, so
yes.
I'm going to.
And you can do quizzes with friends, but you probably won't both get the same questions because we have question pools. But if you like working in a group, that's fine. Yeah. We don't have any prohibition against that.
All right, so we have 2 windows open, and that we find that's easiest. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and get it back into here. And like I said, the CT's coming up, and we'll instruct you on that.
Okay,
cool.
So we put this together at the beginning of the semester based on the 2021 GERO report. Now, the pandemic has kind of affected when the report comes out. It used to come out in the spring, usually like clockwork, but with the pandemic and everything's messed up. So we may not get the next report until after the semester's over, but just in case the report comes out during the semester, make sure you're looking at the one we have in Blackboard. It's the 2021 report, and every year the statistics change a little bit. The one thing I want you to remember when you look at cancer statistics is that it's a look back. So if you have a friend or a loved one who's diagnosed with cancer, your impulse is to go to Dr. Google, which I certainly did, and you want to look up information about that cancer. Well, a lot of the information you see is not really going to be accurate because it's not based on current treatment and current standard of care. It's based on what the treatment and standard of care may have been 5 years ago or longer. And cancer research is progressing so rapidly, and we're making so many exciting discoveries right now that when we look back at these statistics that are based, from 2014 to 2018, we're missing out on a lot of the good stuff. So that's just my little caveat for you if you look at cancer statistics. So
you can go to the GERO report here. We also have information up here.
Yeah, so, and I've copied the important graphs and figures into Blackboard so that you can look at it. So the good news, for most common cancers, we're seeing a decline in death rates. That's very good news, particularly for lung cancer and melanoma, because we have these new checkpoint inhibitors that get your immune system to go after the cancer. And those have been more recently approved for treatment of lung cancer and melanoma. And so, my aunt was diagnosed with lung cancer 15 years ago. There were so few tools in the tool chest back then. You would get diagnosed with lung cancer, you would die within a few months. Now we're seeing much longer periods of survival, and I think that's only going to get better in the future. So great news for lung cancer and melanoma.
Here, I'm going to give you a little perspective on the coronavirus and the pandemic, though. So if we were to look at this year and we looked at how many people died from every form of cancer that exists in our country, and that's, hundreds of cancers, right?
Yes, many cancers.
We'd roughly be about 500,000 people, okay, so then we, look back at the coronavirus, and, the estimate is, the official tally right now is 900,000 people that have died in 2 years. Realistically, it's probably closer to 1.7 million or something like that. So that's just some perspective.
Yes. People die from a lot of things.
Yeah,
cancer is one of them.
People have such fear of cancer, but people don't seem to care about the coronavirus anymore. All right, Here we go.
So cancer deaths have decreased for men and women from 2014 to 2018. They've also decreased for subgroups that are probably more important to you, which is adolescents and young adults and children. And children tend to do better, weirdly, when they get diagnosed with cancer because there's a very high participation rate among children in clinical trials. So the research advances more quickly for pediatric cancers. So we do see some good results.
In fact, the leading edge of cancer research historically was childhood leukemia. That really just busted everything open in terms of medicine doing amazing things for cancer.
Okay. So one of the things I want to talk about is go up just a little bit.
Sorry, I mean this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
We get asked by students, okay, we're talking about all the bad news of cancer and cancer rates and cancer deaths. How can we prevent cancer? And the answer is really amazingly simple. Don't smoke cigarettes. Cigarettes, very, very bad, okay? Exercise, regular exercise. A little bit easier when you're in college or high school. Gets a little bit harder when you have a full-time job or when you get married and have little kids and you've got a lot of responsibilities. But try to get 30 minutes of exercise, 5 days a week or a couple days a week, something. Just keep your body moving. Eat healthy. The American diet is famous for being unhealthy and being correlated to higher rates of cancer. So eat more of like a Mediterranean diet, vegetable-based, lots of plants, fruits, a little bit less on the meat, more fish and chicken, things like that, lean proteins.
And we're going to find later on, Julie's going to go over these drivers of cancer. They're hormones. Yeah. And, when you eat a lot of sugar, you release a lot of insulin. And the body's saying, look at all these goodies, it's time to grow. Well, you know what? If you're predisposed to cancer and you have your foot on the gas pedal from insulin, then it's why diet causes this big increase in risk for cancer. Same thing with sadly too much red meat, because our cells like to grow when you get all those proteins from red meat. And that's a different hormone that we learned last week. We learned about insulin, but we also learned about IGF-1. So both of those are big-time gas pedals for cancer.
Yeah, moderate alcohol consumption, which is 1 drink a day for women, 2 drinks a day for men, is probably okay. More alcohol than that will increase your risk of certain cancers. Limit your sun exposure. People in Australia are really smart about this. They're a little bit more advanced than people in the US are. But just be smart about wearing sunscreen and, wearing a rash guard if you surf or swim or something like that. I know.
Hats.
Yeah, hats. We've gotten good about it lately in our old age.
I got this cool Quicksilver straw hat. It's awesome.
Exactly. So the good news about being a student and studying is you're limiting your sun exposure. So go back up again. Sorry.
Yes,
cigarette sales. So go up. So this is the shocking truth of cigarette smoking, and not just lung cancer, but many different types of cancer are caused by cigarette smoking. So not just lung cancer, but kidney cancer, bladder cancer, esophageal cancer, cervical cancer. Who would imagine? Pancreatic cancer. So my dad has been a heavy smoker his entire life. He's had kidney cancer, he's had bladder cancer, and he was diagnosed with lung cancer in August. So he's had 3 cancers attributable to his smoking. So he's, not.
And that's because it's not just the smoke, but it's all the chemicals that, we've heard a lot about aerosols. Oh, it's Girl Scout cookies.
You're not going to answer right now. Or you can answer.
I'll answer, but what I'm talking about is teratogens, okay? And these things are chemicals that mutate your cells. Let me go get some Girl Scout cookies.
I actually love the Girl Scouts. I was a Girl Scout when I was a kid, so I'm always like, I don't really need the cookies, but maybe I'll bring them to school and give them to my students. So anyway, smoking, very, very bad. We don't really know about vaping. We may see information. Now the dog has to go check it out. The dog also likes Girl Scouts. So here's a graph of cigarette sales and lung cancer mortality rates. And you can see historically how closely linked and how, what an incredible correlation there is between, cigarettes sales and lung cancer mortality. My dog is old and is not going to bark. Bella! Okay, this is real life, people. This is what happens when you try to do this from your house. Okay, we don't really know what's going to happen with vaping. We may see a similar thing in 10 or 20 years, so just be careful, y'all, what you put in your lungs. It can be bad. Okay, Physical activity, exercise is good. I know just walking around campus, you can get a lot of steps. Physical activity has been shown to reduce the risk of breast cancer, colorectal cancer, endometrial cancer. They've even done studies of women after they've been diagnosed with breast cancer, and they've looked at how those women do, studying them over time, if they exercise and if they eat a healthy diet, and they see a reduced recurrence of breast cancer. So if you are diagnosed with breast cancer and you want to reduce your risk that it's going to come back, then make sure you exercise and eat healthy, and you can control some of that risk. So, okay. Alcohol use. Alcohol is correlated to a lot of cancers, primarily colon, rectal, and female breast cancer. So another way that if you're a woman that's diagnosed, or a person diagnosed with breast cancer, that you can reduce your risk of breast cancer.
We got to keep it real here in this class, so, all right? So, which is awesome. So these will increase your risk for cancer, but not as long as you just have one box, and you know
they're the new ones.
Yes, these are the ones, the caramel brownie ones. And I feel like you gotta, it's almost like doing volunteer work in your community. Buying a Girl Scout cookie from a little, 8-year-old girl, that's what you're supposed to do. So.
We have another Girl Scout down the street that's going to hook us up, so we're going to have more.
She's oddly 28 years old, so I don't.
No, she's not. She's in high school. We're supporting her, Donna. Okay. So what we've been seeing, sadly, we're seeing a decrease in a lot of cancer types. We're seeing an increase in cancers that are associated with certain risk factors, like obesity, like diabetes, like alcohol consumption, like cigarette smoking, like HPV. So you can go down now. We're going to look at trends of new cases. So a lot of these, not all cancers are avoidable or controllable. Sometimes it's just bad luck. I have leukemia, have a lot of cancer in my family,
And these are new cases.
It wasn't a shock to me when I got diagnosed, since everyone in my family on my dad's side has had 3 different types of cancer. So I knew it was coming. So men, melanoma, stay out of the sun. Go get a skin cancer check once a year if you're someone who does spend a lot of time in the sun, or if you're someone who's fair skinned and has a lot of moles. Kidney cancer, that's associated with alcohol consumption. It's associated with smoking. It's associated with obesity. On the women's side, liver cancer is associated with obesity
and drinking,
hepatitis C. And so these are things that we have to be thinking about. So scroll down a little bit.
So red is like the red light flashing.
So those are increases.
Those are increases. So we got to do better. And then all the blue is, things have gotten better.
So there's some things we're doing better. We're seeing a decrease in lung cancer for men, probably because cigarette smoking has decreased in many parts of the country. We're seeing a decrease in colorectal cancer for women and for men. So that's something good.
Yeah, and these are skewed a little bit, because what is the number one risk factor of all these cancers? Age. And other than childhood leukemias, a few childhood cancers. So people live longer, we're going to see more cases.
Absolutely.
So it's a double-edged sword. Living longer, you increase your risk, as you guys saw from the first couple of weeks, of these non-communicable, non-infectious chronic diseases of aging, of which cancer is a big one.
Okay.
Awesome.
Now let's look at the trends in the cancer death rates. So we can see in women, we're seeing an increase in uterine cancer. We're seeing an increase in liver cancer. Again, hep C, obesity, diabetes. Men are also seeing an increase in liver cancer. I want to take a minute just to talk about prevention. Again, another way that we can prevent cancer right now is through HPV vaccine. The CDC has changed their recommendation for a lot of you when you were coming up through the system and you were maybe 11 or 12, which is when we used to start talking to kids about getting HPV vaccines. There was a sense that only those really young kids should get vaccinated against HPV. The CDC has said, okay, we're going to open it up to adults who are 26 years old. And if you're older than 26, you can talk to your doctor about it and find out if it's appropriate for you. But what's very, very clear, and again, Australia is an example of a country that has really pursued HPV vaccines very heavily as a public health measure. They're seeing a rapid decrease in all these cancers that are correlated: oral cancer, anal cancer, rectal cancer, pharyngeal cancer, all these cancers that can affect any person, male, female, anywhere in between. And getting this vaccine can make a big difference.
And
So.
and what is HPV, human papilloma virus? So not to be alarmist, but we have these viruses that put you at risk for cancers. So Epstein-Barr is a risk. Not a huge risk, but it is a risk for certain leukemias, and then hepatitis virus, hepatitis C,
Yeah.
is a huge risk for cancer. And you know what? We don't know. You guys are part of the experiment, the epidemiology. We don't know down the line what the coronavirus experience is going to be in terms of risk for cancers for your generation in 40 years.
Yeah, and we actually have several. We have two young women, two of my nieces, and a male friend who's our age, that all had HPV related cancers. And you're thinking, okay, I've always heard, oh man, to get HPV you have to be really promiscuous. No, you don't. It's out there. Everyone gets exposed to it. Unless you are a nun, you're going to get exposed to it.
When you have sex with somebody, you have sex with everybody they had sex with in their entire 15-year history before you met them.
Do you feel like you're in high school and your parents are lecturing you?
I'm telling you, it's the reality.
But anyway, it's out there. You get exposed to it. By the time people are, say, in their 30s or 40s, probably 50% of the people have been exposed to it. By the time you're my age, everyone's been exposed to it.
But the good news, you see a lot of the blues. So even if you do get diagnosed, the treatments have gotten so much better that the death rates are for the most part going down. Again, you got to think about age and all these too. So if people oftentimes have a lot of complicating factors when they get older. So okay.
I want to talk a little bit about the effect of the pandemic, because I do have a very significant concern about the pandemic and how it has affected public health and how we're going to see these results years down the line. So what happened when the pandemic started, and I was guilty of this too, I'm usually pretty aggressive about pursuing preventive care, but I missed my mammogram for a year. I delayed my colonoscopy. I didn't go to my skin cancer check with my doctor. And then as soon as, I felt comfortable doing those things, I started booking those appointments and getting everything done.
A year and a half break, basically.
Yeah. So
same with me.
So sadly, if you get diagnosed with colon cancer early, it's very treatable. If for many people who don't get their colonoscopies, they don't get diagnosed until they're having a lot of pain and a lot of symptoms. And at some point, it might be, stage 4 cancer, and it's a little bit harder to treat. So we need to really remind our families, remind your parents that they need to get in there, get their mammograms done, get their prostates, checked. It's an easy blood test. Get a colonoscopy. Mammograms, I think, start at age 40 now. Colonoscopies start at age 45. And these are easy tests that can prevent, the delay in diagnosis.
It's a big difference between a stage 1 or 2 breast cancer or stage 1 or 2 colon cancer and a stage 4 colon or breast cancer. Big difference.
Absolutely. So let's scroll down a little bit.
Okay. I'm the assistant. Yeah.
Okay. So this is where it gets real. So looking forward, because of the pandemic, the dark blue line is colorectal cancer. These are excess deaths from colorectal cancer, dark blue. And then the light blue line is excess deaths from breast cancer. So this is going to have an impact for the next 10 years. We're going to see, when we get 8-10 years out, we're going to see maybe 5,000, 4,000. That's a lot of people that are going to die because they didn't get diagnosed on time and they didn't get treated on time during the pandemic. So we all need to get back out there and
it speaks to what I was just talking about. Cancer progresses. So if you don't get in there, and cancer can be a rapidly progressing disease. So if you miss a year or two, especially early on, it's sadly the ship has kind of sailed in some ways. And so getting in there now is never too late. So.
Okay, go down. Okay, now here's the next thing that I get really excited about with cancer research is that we look at our incidence rates and we look at our death rates. And these are normalized to be cases per 100,000, because if you have a small group of people like American Indians, you won't be able to really understand the data. Is it just because the population's small, or is, what's going on there? So if we normalize it to cases per 100,000 people, we can then more easily compare by sex and by race, ethnicity.
And what is the incidence? I always think of the first two letters in incidence, and then the C. Incidence stands for increase. All right, so that's the number of new cases that year.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we see the
New cases.
most cases in non-Hispanic white patients. Number 2 is non-Hispanic Black. Number 3 is non-Hispanic American Indian. And number 4
Asian
is
Pacific Island.
yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
yeah.
Yes, no, number 4 is Hispanic.
Yeah.
Number 5 is Asian Pacific Islander.
Right.
So if you're an Asian Pacific Islander person, you're feeling pretty good about yourself right now because your incidence rate is low, and that's pretty awesome.
It's almost half.
Yeah.
Almost.
Now, when we look over on the death side, here's where I get upset because I feel like we have problems with access to healthcare in the US. If you're from another country, you're probably nodding your head right now saying you guys are crazy. And so what we see here is we see even though non-Hispanic white people had a higher incidence rate, they have a lower death rate than non-Hispanic Black people. And again, if you go down and compare, you say, okay, non-Hispanic Black people are not doing as well. Non-Hispanic American Indians aren't doing as well. So we need to be worried what's happening here. And
we can look at the females too.
Yes, and so you can look at women too. And so if you look at the incidence rate under gender, under sex, Black men have the highest rate of cancer. White women have the highest rate of cancer. And then on the death side, non-Hispanic Black men have the highest death rate, and non-Hispanic Black women have the highest death rate.
Why is that, guys? Why is that?
We
what do you think?
We have work to do, and some of it's socioeconomic. So some of it is, do you have good insurance? It costs money to get good health care. You have to trust in the medical system. So if you don't feel like when you go to the doctor that you're taken seriously and that they will listen to you and listen to your concerns, then that can affect your health care. But it also, we also see research that shows that even if you compare white people and Black people who have the same insurance, that Black people are still having a higher death rate from cancer. So there's something going on in our medical system. And for those of you who are going to medical school, I want you to really work hard to make sure that you're treating all of your patients the same, that you're being sensitive to, hey, maybe this person, do I have a bias where I'm not treating this person seriously and I'm not ordering the same tests for them or diagnosing them as quickly as I might diagnose someone else? I take John with me to my appointments. I have a great oncologist and I really like him, but I have found over the years that when John goes with me to the appointments, I can say something, and if John says it, they listen. Right. So bring a white guy to your next appointment.
Well, it's women awesome. Sadly, women in medicine, it's like you're hysterical women, hysterical females. And the other thing that's in terms of cancer and access to the newest treatments, there is Julie's part of this new trial called All of Us, but the reality is, if we look at the last 100 years of clinical trials for treating cancer, if we look at the last 10 years of clinical trials, and this is where you're getting the best medicine possible with the least amount of side effects. The average person that's doing a clinical trial is a white male.
Absolutely. And so we have a lot of difficulty getting women and people of color to participate in clinical trials. And you do get really good care in clinical trials.
Absolutely.
You get the latest and greatest treatments. And I've been the beneficiary of really good treatment.
Oftentimes free. Hey. Oh, look who it is.
She's just happy to be here.
My God. That's a gerontology dream.
It's 45 minutes before her dinner time, and she's getting increasingly anxious.
This is a show today, but you know what? This is all about, it's Zoom University. Except this is not Zoom. This is YouTube.
She thinks there's a small chance we're going to forget
to dinner. All right.
Okay. Alrighty, so think about why we have these differences. Is it culture? Is it lifestyle? Is it food? Is it exercise? Is it workplace exposure? Is it socioeconomic? Is it whether or not we feel comfortable with our medical practitioners? Yeah. So I dream about a world where that death rate is not going to be any different for, it's going to be the same across race and ethnicity.
And it's cumulative advantage and cumulative disadvantage. So, over your entire life course, these little Y's in the road, little forks in the road, and that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And Julie's from New Orleans. And And who has some of the worst cancer rates in the country?
Yeah,
Why is it?
absolutely.
Well, in New Orleans, the culture of
Alcohol,
alcohol and
fatty
food,
food, delicious fatty food.
it's insanity, And so if she was still
and it's
there,
really
she
hot
might
there.
be.
It's hard to exercise in New Orleans.
True.
So the other thing I want to point out is that it's not just socioeconomic. People who live in rural areas have a much more difficult time accessing quality medical care and getting to specialists who understand a lot about their disease. And, even in my area, we live in Orange County. There's amazing healthcare here. I went to my local oncologist and asked him, how many people do you treat with my diagnosis? And he said, well, besides you, 2 other people. So I went to UCSD, and the guy that I see down there sees only people with my diagnosis all day long, every day.
All right, and the difference in treatment was otherworldly.
It's remarkable.
The guy wanted to do a combination of 3 chemotherapy drugs up here.
None of which would have worked.
None of which would work because he didn't do his homework. And then you go to University of California, San Diego, Morris Cancer Center, state of the art. They know, okay, we're going to do a trial with these 2 targeted drugs that are specific based on your genetics.
Yeah.
Okay?
So anyway.
Awesome. Cool.
So you can dig into the National Cancer Institute. What is CancerSite? There are a few quiz questions that are from there.
And just to know more, beyond that, this is life.
This is life, yeah, sadly. And then we've got this cool video that just tells you a little bit about cancer biology. And then scroll down, because the thing I really like, a lot of students have a hard time understanding the difference between a proto-oncogene and an oncogene and a tumor suppressor gene and what's going on with that. So a proto-oncogene is the regular gene that's not mutated, it doesn't have anything wrong with it, and it's functioning normally.
It's a really bad choice of words. It's our normal gene that we use to grow new cells.
Yeah, but then it gets a mutation or a deletion in the gene, and then typically what happens is you get a weird protein that's on the surface of the cell. So like for breast cancer patients, it's the HER2 gene that sits on the surface of the cell, and then all of a sudden it upregulates certain tumor growth.
Right.
A tumor suppressor gene normally would suppress tumors, but you get an inactivation, a deletion or a mutation in that gene, and then all of a sudden it's not suppressing tumors anymore. So the tumors are allowed to grow out of control. So elephants have a gene called P53. They have something like 100 copies of it. People generally only have 2. And when one of ours goes bad, that's really, really bad.
And that's one of those tumor suppressor genes. And it is, again, across all the hundreds of different cancers, the most common mutation that exists for cancer is the P53 mutation, where, again, it's you're not putting the brakes on the cancer. When you put in the brakes on cancer, what the key thing that P53 does, it goes in there and says, oh, I see a mutation in your genetics. I see in your chromosomes, in that cookbook of recipes, there's a mutation that it's going to make bad proteins. So, and these bad proteins could be basically rocket fuel for cell growth. So the P53 will go in there and direct the repair. We're going to repair that bad gene. And then if the amount of mutations are overwhelming, the P53 is a kill switch. And it says, okay, that's it, you're done. And it's a process called, sadly, it's a scientific name called apoptosis, but it kills off the bad cells, okay? If you have a mutated P53, you can't repair all the hundreds of other mutations, and you can't kill off that cell. So it divides and passes it on to each new cell line, and what you then have is this tumor that just goes whoop, like that. So
and apparently elephants don't get cancer very often because they have so many copies of P53 that if one mutates, the rest of them are fine. And I think what's important about knowing a little bit about these oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes, cancer patients are the beneficiary now of personalized medicine. I've had next generation sequencing done of my leukemia cells. And so when I talk to other leukemia patients, we trade back and forth. We're like, oh, I'm 11q deleted. What are you? Oh, I'm, trisomy 12. Oh, I've got 2p and 3p. What about you? Oh, I have SF3B1. And so we all know a lot more, and these genes that are mutated in our cancers provide targets. So we're able to say, okay, here's a drug that hits this target, and it's been used in lung cancer, but maybe it'll work in melanoma. Maybe it'll work in pancreatic cancer. We'll be able to take a drug and then use it on a lot of different cancer patients as we become aware about what their particular personalized genetic makeup is.
And I know a lot of you guys are business majors, and your ears and brain should light up at this concept, okay? Because this is big business, you know. Doing this individualized medicine based on single patient genetic screening, and then tailoring drugs for these. I mean, this is such an enormous part of healthcare business. I can't even tell you. So keeping your finger on the pulse of that for the future is huge. Huge.
Yeah. So the future for cancer patients is good. Research is progressing quickly. We're seeing a lot of advances. Recently, I read an article about CAR T cell treatment.
Now she wants to go outside and take a leak. We have the most demanding old woman in the world. Dawn.
She's almost 13, and I don't know how to say this, but she does not give a fuck about anything except what she wants. Excuse my language. I apologize. Anyway, so let's move down and talk about grief, death, and dying. And I also am very passionate about this topic. Grief is something we all experience.
Especially during the pandemic.
Especially during the pandemic. Many of us have lost people during the pandemic. We've been relatively lucky in our family, but my sister-in-law's dad passed away from COVID. And so we've seen a lot of loss in the last couple of years. I lost my mom suddenly a few years ago, and she and I were best buddies. And the process of grief that I went through after she passed away was really long and complicated and hard. And I was a mess for a couple of weeks, couldn't sleep. I just kept playing in my mind what happened. She had a sudden cardiac event. She ended up dying in the hospital, and just thinking, oh, what if I'd been there? Could I have prevented it? And so I have a lot of compassion for those of you who have experienced loss recently. I want to say it gets easier. My mom passed away almost 3 years ago, and this year at Christmas, when I was putting out all the little Christmas things she made and gave us, I had kind of a happy feeling. You know, it reminded me of her, but it wasn't painful. It did take me a couple years to get to that point. So give yourself time. If you are experiencing grief and loss, give yourself time. There's the video of Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is kind of the giant of grief theories.
Yeah, she was the first one that really sat down and said, we're going to categorize all these stages that we go through.
And so she's not the only theory. She is one theory, but she's a very popular theory that most people know about. And her thing is DABDA. So it's denial, anger, bargaining, despair, acceptance. And those are the stages that you theoretically go through when you're grieving.
And you can do this when you lose a job. You can do this when you lose a girlfriend.
When you lose a pet, if you fail a big test, you know, if you don't get the job you wanted or you get fired from your job, you know, there's a lot of things that can cause grief in your life, not just death of a parent, death of a loved one, et cetera. But the process of, you know, denial, anger, bargaining, despair, acceptance isn't necessarily linear. You might start with denial, you know, skip a stage, go to bargaining, go back to denial, go to, you know, despair, go back to anger. So you may find yourself going through the stages more than once until you get through it. And
right. And by the way, the best way to get over a breakup with a significant other, just go find another one. I swear, it's the best cure.
Okay, weird story, but we had a dog that we adored, and she passed away. Like 6 years ago. And we thought, how can we ever get another dog? We'll never love another dog as much as we loved that one. And then we rescued this silly dog that we have now. She was 7 years old, and she was a psychological mess because she'd lived on the streets for a couple of years. And she's awesome. So John says, you know, Bella's going to die at some point. We should just get a new dog right away to help us with the pain. So, but you have to do what's good for you.
The only thing is, for living on the streets, she likes chingazos, so which means she likes to fight.
She does. Come here. She's a fighter and a lover. Yes. So anyway, so other things I want to talk about grief. There's different types of grief. There's complicated grief, which is grief that lasts maybe a little bit longer than you might expect or be comfortable with. You have anticipatory grief. So, you know, let's say you have a loved one or a parent or a grandparent who's sick and very old, and you know they're going to die, and you can kind of see the train coming down the tracks, and it's painful and hard, but you almost have time to let go before it happens.
That was me with my mom.
Yes, his mother lived to be 95.
And you know, everybody has their, you know, I felt sad, but I was talking to Julie about it today. I feel a little guilty. It was really hard because she had about a year-long slow downward spiral, and so I was having to, we talk about the sandwich generation. So I'm sandwiched between um, caring for Julie, who is everything to me, my kids, working up at USC. So I'm living here in Laguna Niguel. I'm working up at USC, and then my mom's in Brea. So it's a big triangle that I was driving every other day, driving. It was killing me, and so metaphorically, it was just a really lot of stress on me, and I had a sense of relief when my mom
She
finally
was
passed.
she was
So
ready
she
to
was
go.
95.
She was ready
She had
to
a
go.
great life, and
Yeah.
so it was very much, a burden. It was a weight off my
Yeah.
shoulders.
And it's okay to feel that way when someone passes away who's been suffering and very ill and in a lot of pain or maybe experiencing dementia. And when they finally do pass away, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm sad, but it's also a relief that this is over.
Hmm.
You may have ambiguous grief. That's when you're mourning someone who isn't dead. So you've had a relationship breakup, you've had your parents are divorced, and maybe you don't see one of the parents as often anymore. Um, you have a friend who experiences drug addiction or mental health issues and they're just not available to you anymore. Or maybe you've had to create a boundary and say, okay, I'm not going to be around you anymore.
You had to shed the
Um,
assholes.
so you can have that sort of ambiguous grief that's difficult to deal with. And you can obviously have a lot of non-death losses, like having a bad day at your job or not getting into the graduate school that you want to go to or something like that. So there's all these different types of grief that you may experience. In terms of handling grief, don't underestimate the importance of ritual. We have funerals or celebrations of life or, sitting Shiva or whatever your grief process is. Sometimes that ritual can be comforting and it can help you accept the fact that the person is gone and share how you feel with the other people that are also grieving. Time helps. Be patient with yourself. Be kind to yourself when you lose someone and you're struggling. You're not going to feel better in a day or two. The more you love the person, probably the more it's going to hurt and then the longer it's going to last, but that's okay. And the other thing that I think is really powerful is that relationship is not over because the person's dead. The relationship has just changed. They're not physically present anymore, but you have their memory. And so my mom's birthday is February 14th, which is coming up
Valentine's Day.
a week from Monday. And so I've been thinking about her a lot, and we had such good times and we used to talk on the phone all the time. She lived back outside of New Orleans and we would talk for an hour every Sunday morning. And then we would email and text and Facebook each other in between. And we would just make each other laugh all the time. And so I can think about her and think happy thoughts, and do the things that she liked to do. She was a great cook, so I would make her recipes at holidays, and that gives me a lot of comfort. She was an amazing gardener, so I put a butterfly hummingbird garden in our backyard, and every time I look at it, it reminds me of my mom and how she had such a green thumb.
See the plants? There you go.
The plants behind us are some of them were from her garden. I took little starts.
A bunch of
So
them
doing
were.
the things
All of them were.
that the person that you have lost, doing the things that they enjoyed doing or that were meaningful that you used to do with them can help a lot
Yeah,
too.
here, let's see, you guys. I'm going to show you. See the plant stand behind us back there? Okay, I'm not doing a good job, but there it is. So every one of those plants, we had this little plant rack back here. Every one was a start from her mom's garden. So we had this kind of living kind of legacy. That's great. So
now, I know because of the pandemic and just because some of you may have experienced loss that's very fresh and difficult, if you don't want to do this discussion, we have an alternative assignment. You could do one of two things. If you don't want to do the discussion publicly, you can send me your response to my email. Or if you want an alternative assignment and you just don't feel comfortable talking about death and loss and grieving, you can email me and I'll give you an alternative assignment. So we understand that many of you have probably experienced loss that's been very difficult, and you may not feel that comfortable talking about it in a classroom setting.
and I can tell you the way I dealt with all my losses is just because I'm such an adrenaline doping junkie. Anytime I'm having trouble like that, what do? I go surfing. I just go lose myself in surfing for a couple hours, and it really helped to kind of dilute the problem for me. It always does.
Surfing heals all
It
wounds.
does.
It does.
Cool.
Alrighty, I think that's all I've got.
All right, guys.
Stay well. Let us know if you're having any problems or if you need help. If you have any questions about the class, we're always here for you. And we want you all to be successful and happy.
All right, peace. Look at that. Look at that beautiful couple. That was, that was us in Tavarua, Fiji on a surf trip. Like I said, surfing cures all. Okay, bye, guys.
Bye, guys.